Good evening, everyone. Severe Weather Team 9 meteorologist Nathan Shutt. A little early for this edition of Nate at 8, but just wanted to hop on here. As currently no severe thunderstorms, but we've been tracking some strong thunderstorms at times going throughout this evening. So wanted to go ahead and jump on here a little bit early, and we're going to be tracking some of these strong thunderstorms progressing further north across the area. So thanks so much for tuning into this earlier edition of Nate at 8. I appreciate it. Hopefully everyone had a great weekend. I know less than desirable in terms of the weather. This weather has just not been good. I don't think there's any other way to put it. Unfortunately, here as of recent, but at least looking ahead, I promise there's some nicer weather ahead. We finally get some dry days in the mix, and that is part of what we're going to be talking about for this edition of Nate at 8 is thankfully, yes, with an exclamation point, dry weather is ahead. I promise this has been a wet stretch of weather. Again, less than ideal conditions, but there's some drier weather ahead, and we can get into a quiet pattern here even within the coming week, and we'll discuss that. Up until that point, yes, we're still tracking showers and thunderstorms here this evening that we're going to dive right into right after this. And then while we're drying up likely into tomorrow morning, more rain will likely be returning for the latter part of tomorrow. Less overall with thunderstorm severe risk tomorrow, just going to be more of rain moving back into the area. And then from there is when we'll start to track some drier conditions likely. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Again, we're diving into what we're tracking here into this evening. And you'll see the thunderstorms primarily right now are centered around Ohio County, moving into Brooke County, Jefferson County, dealing with a weaker thunderstorm into northern Carroll County. Those are the storms we're tracking currently into the area, just more of a shower activity outside of that. And what we've been primarily dealing with these thunderstorms has been all these icons that you see right here. This icon right here, this is for large hail. And that has been primarily what we'll be dealing with, just hail reports. I mean, just primarily what we've been dealing with for a lot of this. Did some damaging winds reported as well. That's what this icon's for. There's been, some damaging winds reported, but, the same there in Holmes County as well. But primarily what we've seen, large hail, right? That's been our primary concern with these thunderstorms. And this is what we've been tracking, not large hail, but we've seen some smaller hail with this storm that's been tracking through Marshall, now into Ohio County. And at times, the hail core is a little more organized than not. If this were to have gained a little more strength at times, I think it would have prompted a severe thunderstorm warning. But just staying under that threshold, but still this likely has been producing some at least small hail through portions of Marshall, and again now through Ohio County. And you can see at times what I'm discussing here, you see that darker purple, that's the hail core, which again, it's been more established at times, and that higher reflectivity is just evidence there of this likely producing some hail. So there's likely been some small hail at times of the storm. That's now moving through West Liberty area. And again, it's starting to lift now from out of Ohio County and into Brooke County. Some gusty winds with that, but what we've primarily seen with that is some small hail. A little higher wind speeds from what we've seen into southern Jefferson. Again, nothing to prompt a severe thunderstorm warning, no damaging winds, but you might have noticed it, just some gusty winds in general with this as it's been moving towards the north. And when we look at the hail, again, you can see that where that purple is, that's evidence of some small hail, more on the order of about pea-sized. And we've been seeing that through Marshall, the eastern part of Marshall, and through the more eastern part of Ohio County. That's where we've seen with that same storm we were just discussing, right? That's now lifting into Brooke County. It's been more of small hail, more than any gusty winds, and we've been seeing primarily with that storm. And again, what we're seeing right now in terms of wind speeds, we're seeing radar estimating some of these higher wind speeds. We're seeing, radar estimated into southern Jefferson County has been primarily wind gusts up to about 40 miles per hour. We'll see what it's sampling right now with the latest scan leading up closer to 8 and roughly the same, up to 35, 40 mile per hour. There's some gusty winds, but nothing that's going to be prompting a severe thunderstorm warning, right? We're not seeing wind gusts up to 60. We're generally up to about 40 miles per hour. Still some gusty winds. This is a strong storm lifting through Jefferson County, moving through the Steubenville, Wintersville, Bloomingdale area right now. It's continuing to lift to the north. So just watch for some gusty winds as that's moving north through Jefferson County. Again, maybe some small hails with that other storm that's moving through Ohio County now into Brooke County. And so that's a bit of what we've been tracking so far throughout this evening. And again, outside of that, if we go back and again, broaden our view, scroll out here a bit. Outside of that, some shower activity moving back through areas south of I-70 for the most part. Some showers moving back Noble County, some showers moving into Wetzel County, some showers now moving through Tuscarawas County. A weaker storm there into northern Carroll could gain a little more strength, but dealing with a thunderstorm there to northern Carroll right now. And again, these stronger thunderstorms, Jefferson, Ohio County, now moving into Brooke County. Again, nothing severe, right? Not tracking any damaging winds right now. We're not tracking any large hail right now, but there is that potential for some small hail, primarily into Brooke County, and some gusty winds, primarily moving through Jefferson County. That's what we're tracking, right? The wind speeds estimated closer to upwards about 40 miles per hour. The hail more on the order of about pea size. So again, it's smaller hail. So nothing that's been prompting the severe criteria. But I will say, I think these storms in our area, for the most part, they've been close. I think, we've dealt with some stronger thunderstorms. We've been close at times to, I think if these were to gain a little more strength, I think at times it would have prompted severe thunderstorm warnings, but we really haven't seen that a lot going throughout this evening. We had a severe thunderstorm warning for a brief period of time into Noble County, moving towards Guernsey County, but that weakened as it moved into Guernsey County, that storm, and for the most part avoiding severe thunderstorm warnings, but still dealing with some strong thunderstorms. Just not quite enough strength in these storms, and thankfully that's been the case, right? Thankfully, not quite enough strength to deal with real large hail or damaging winds with these storms. So hopefully it stays that way, but we're still watching these, still maintaining enough strength to produce some small hail, some gusty winds, and we have that potential still here. I would watch, here still to start to wane down likely at this point, but we're still going to watch at least over the next hour as these storms continue to lift towards the north. And again, that hail threat primarily through Marshall, Ohio, now moving into Brooke County that's north of West Liberty, and we're dealing with some just generally gusty winds moving through Jefferson County, the very western part of Brooke County possible as well. And we'll see what radar is estimating for these wind speeds. We've generally been seeing the potential for these wind gusts upwards about 40 miles per hour. Again, the hail on the order of more of pea-sized hail. That's generally what we've been looking at. And we broaden our view. Still going to track more rain moving back into the area here early tonight. So while the severe risk will likely start to subside within the next hour, that while the severe risk is going to start to fall off with the loss of daytime heating after the sun sets, we're still going to be tracking some lingering rain here early on tonight before that will even taper off. Drew, joining us this evening on Facebook. Good evening. How are you doing? I'm doing well, Drew. How are you? The thunderstorm in St. Clairsville, but never rained here. I tried to storm. I got you. Yeah, moving. I saw that move mainly there through Ohio County. So I've been very close there in St. C an area there, Drew. Not looking forward to tomorrow's weathers. Drew was saying this evening. And yeah, it doesn't look ideal. Unfortunately, later on tomorrow, I think that rain can be more steady. I think it can be more of a rain than a shower activity. Less scattered and more widespread, I think, later on tomorrow. But at least at that point, again, the severe risk looks very low. I don't think we're dealing with much of anything with severe weather or really much in terms of thunderstorm activity, but it will be more of an occasional rain tomorrow, especially in the afternoon, evening. Not too much in the morning, but yeah, more so in the afternoon and evening. At least we're getting the much needed rain to keep us out of a drought, Drew is saying. And we touched on April's rainfall, overall dealing with some above normal precipitation. We had an inch above normal for our precipitation in April, but it was a far cry from what we had last April. If you think back to what we had then, that was historic rainfall that we had, especially earlier in the month. We dealt with 2 rounds of flooding along the Ohio River. That was historic for us here in the Ohio Valley, and getting on plenty of rain here, and like Drew mentioned, at least we're keeping drought conditions away, but it certainly will be nice to see some dry weather return here later this week. I can see the storm that formed over me and moved northwest, Drew is saying. Just had a nice thunder shower go through Bel Air, Joe saying, joining us this evening on Facebook. Good evening there, Lola. Thunderstorms in the area. Lola's reporting this evening. Thunder, lightning, rain coming through brilliant right now, Patty is saying, joining us on Facebook. And Drew's doing fine. Good to hear, Drew. Good to hear. Drew's reporting in, doing fine here. Good to hear, Drew. I hope everyone's doing fine and wonderful this weekend. Hopefully, you had a great weekend, and again, hopefully, I get to look forward to a really nice weekend. I think setting up here. I know it's less than ideal weather-wise this weekend, but I promise this coming weekend is looking a lot nicer weather coming our way. Just again, touch on this one more time if you're just tuning in. What we're tracking into our area is still dealing with some strong thunderstorms there into moving out of Ohio County into Brooke County, Jefferson County. You can see some gusty winds with this. It does cover there the very northeastern part of Harrison as well. You can see some gusty winds with this, maybe some small hail. That's the extent of what we've been seeing for primarily a lot of these storms. They've been trying to gain enough strength to mature to the extent where they can start to produce large hail and damaging winds. Just haven't seen that come to fruition much, but still nonetheless some strong storms continue to move across our area. And we had that watching effect for most locations in our area. The only exception was Tyler County. That went into effect this afternoon. It was in effect until 9 o'clock, but you'll notice, we still have a little less than an hour, right, until this it does expire. But we're starting to see some counties actually lifted out of this watch. So that would include Noble, Guernsey, Monroe, and Wetzel County. Again, Tyler County was never under it, but those counties in the gray, the severe threat is starting to subside for those areas. And we'll likely see this continue to get trimmed as those storms are continuing to progress further north into the area. So what we're primarily concerned about now at this point here over the next hour or so for any severe threat that can continue for, again, some high winds, potentially some large hail. That would be the primary concern. That's what we've mainly seen, especially the large hail concern. That's what we've been primarily seeing across the area. I don't think there's very much of a risk at all for a tornado, but it can't be ruled out. But certainly damaging winds, large hail. If we're seeing that storm mature to the extent it becomes severe, that's what we're concerned about primarily. And again, at this point, it's mainly north of I-70 over the next about hour to watch. Still, those counties to see under the severe thunderstorm watch. This doesn't extend leading up closer to 9 o'clock. Still dry here in New Cumberland. Tammy's reporting. And how's Friday looking? It's looking very nice, Drew. This Friday's looking very nice. Had a good rain, and Cameron, Brenda's reporting. And a little bit of rumbling thunder, Brenda says, seeing that storm move through the Cameron area in Marshall County. Austin, evening, and happy Cinco de Mayo. Happy Cinco de Mayo as well. Good evening there, Austin. How was your weekend? Mine was great. Hopefully yours was as well. And again, I know that this past weekend, weather-wise, less than ideal, but I promise this coming weekend looking very nice. Even Friday as well. A nice stretch of weather coming our way. Tiny bit of hail here in Wintersville. McKenna reporting doesn't look too big, though. So getting some reports of what we just talked about, the potential there for some small hail with that storm lifting north across the areas. Again, that's mainly Jefferson Brook. That'll continue to lift north through Jefferson and then eventually into Hancock County as well. So getting some reports thanks for so much for chiming in, guys. Seeing some reports of a dime-sized hail, Chrissy says, in Wellsburg. So getting some of that smaller hail. And that's primarily what we've seen with a lot of these storms is that hail concern. Again, thankfully for us, these storms haven't matured to the extent to start to produce larger hail. So certainly good news there. But yes, we're still seeing some small hail with these storms, some gusty winds, just not to the extent where it's reaching quarter size or those wind gusts are reaching closer to 60. That's what's going to prompt a severe thunderstorm warning. That's our criteria, just not reaching that with these storms. But nonetheless, still some strong storms moving through portions of the area. And again, that's moving through Jefferson as well as we'll go back and Ian, if you're just tuning in, we'll go back to this before we continue with our forecast. And again, this is where we're seeing those storms now moving through Jefferson County, the very northeastern part of Harrison County as well, now lifting through Brooke County. So extending from Brooke, Jefferson, northeastern Harrison. This is where we're dealing with those strong thunderstorms. They're continuing to move to the north and again will impact areas into northern Jefferson and then the remainder of Brooke and into even portions of Hancock County. And this will be affecting likely the eastern part of Carroll County as well. And what we've been primarily dealing with this is a potential there for some small hail, which is what radars been picking up on, as this is again the same storm that's been moving through portions of Marshall, Ohio, now affecting portions of Brooke as well as Jefferson. Has been primarily small hail, more in the order of about pea-sized, or like Chrissy was reporting, dime-sized hail. So it's been smaller. Again, the hail would have to reach closer to quarter size, if not greater, for it to prompt a severe thunderstorm warning. And still dealing with some gusty winds with this. We can see where radar's estimating for wind speeds, which have been generally up to about 40 miles per hour is what we've been seeing with this. So still some gusty winds, but not reaching closer to 60. That would prompt a severe thunderstorm warning. So still a strong thunderstorm for those areas. And again, this is going to be impacting locations, northern Jefferson, eastern Carroll, then moving through the remainder of Brooke and into portions of Hancock, of course, Steubenville, towards Toronto, and then again northern Jefferson, eventually making its way towards likely staying close to Carrollton, if not mainly east of Carrollton, continuing to move north across the area, and eventually towards New Cumberland as well. So again, eventually will be affecting most locations there in Hancock County, northern Jefferson, eastern part of Carroll, and then a good portion of Columbiana County. So that's where it's heading. And again, strong thunderstorm. We'll continue to monitor to make sure it doesn't gain a little more strength, but just not gaining enough strength to become severe. But nonetheless, still some gusty winds, still some small hail. That's what to watch for as this lifts north across the area. Strong winds too, Jessica reporting, getting some of those gusty winds and dime-sized hail and Brilliant. Thanks for reporting there, Jessica. Hail lasted about a few minutes. So several reports coming in. I really appreciate the reports. Several reports coming in of the small hail that we've been seeing that this can produce. So thank you so much for reporting that. And again, yeah, we still can see this produce that as well, continuing to move north across the area. So if you're still out ahead of the storm, that potential is there for some small hail with this as it's moving across the region. And I believe I just heard some small hail here at the station as well. So how about that? I think we're getting a little small hail as well. You can hear it hitting the roof, some of that hail at our station in Mingo Junction. So hearing some of that firsthand as well. So yeah, still producing some small hail with this as it's lifting north across the area. All right, so let's jump forward here. And again, that severe thunderstorm watch, it's primarily for locations now north of I-70 for the most part. And wow, how about that? They just cut off more counties. So perfect timing to go back to this. So mainly north of I-70, looking into Harrison, Carroll, Columbiana, Jefferson, Brooke, Hancock, Ohio County. Those are the only counties that remain of that severe thunderstorm watch. Again, really right now, we're just monitoring the storms moving through portions of Harrison, Carroll, Jefferson, Brooke, Hancock, and eventually Columbiana County, really just monitoring that storm that we were just tracking. That's really what we're monitoring now at this point, just to make sure it doesn't gain a little more steam. Again, if it gains a little more strength, it can become severe. So we're just monitoring the storm, those wind speeds, the hail size, both staying under the criteria for a severe thunderstorm warning at this point. But if it gains a little more strength, we can see a warning issued. So really just now watching that storm as it continues to lift north across the area. And that's likely it that we're going to be watching in terms of any severe risk that we're going to have. We'll continue to monitor that here, over the next hour or so, within the next hour. And that's what we're going to be watching. And then after that, the severe risk will wane. And then from there, we'll be watching for a lot of this precipitation tapering off as well for the latter part of tonight. So we'll see a lot of this precipitation taper off later on tonight. And with some clearing in our skies, I'd watch, because any clearing we can get as a lot of this precipitation tapers off, this is when we can see some areas of fog develop. So I'd watch any areas that can clear. This is when we can get that fog to develop. Could be dense in spots, just something to watch for going into tomorrow morning would be the potential for more fog. And again, we do likely see some clearing where it can clear some. That's where we can get that fog to develop. Low temperature falling to around 50 degrees, looking mainly dry as we start tomorrow, but then notice what happens as we get into the afternoon and evening. The rain spills back in. And yes, this can be more of an occasional shower, if not steady rain. And we're going to end tomorrow likely quite wet. Now, a thunderstorm is possible in the mix, but the severe weather risk looks very low, to the point where it's unlikely that we're dealing with any severe thunderstorms. But we could still see a thunderstorm in the mix. We're primarily dealing with more occasional showers, if not a steady rain for the latter part of your Tuesday. By early Tuesday night, then, this precipitation is going to start to taper off. So we're going to dry back up likely into Wednesday morning. But notice what doesn't return for Wednesday. Likely the rain. So we do likely end up dry for your Wednesday before we have at least one more round here. Some showers returning into the latter part of Thursday. I will say what we see return later into the day Thursday does look more hit or miss. Coming our way into the latter part of Thursday. But by Tuesday, this is when we're dealing with more of that widespread occasional showers, rain likely for the latter part of your Tuesday. And it's a wet into the day tomorrow. By Thursday, that precipitation likely more hit or miss, but still I'd watch for at least a few showers returning later into the day Thursday. And then we'll dry back up Friday and likely stay dry then as we go through the weekend. And we get into a very nice pattern here. We finally start to break this wet pattern and we're getting back to sunshine and some dry conditions likely Friday for the weekend. Looking great. That beautiful weather likely carries over early next week, and temperatures are going to start to pick up during this. So, it's quite cool for a lot of these days going into Friday, but then we're back in the 70s this weekend and then likely 80s early next week. So temperatures are going to start to pick up, and this is a nice pattern that we're getting back into by Friday through the weekend. And I will say this pattern looks to stay warm even going through the middle of this month. So that being said, now, I think our odds of getting any frost or freeze at this point are very low. I don't think we have good odds at all to see that return. I think overall we're dealing with a warm pattern here for a lot of the stretch. So that being said, I think with an overall low risk of dealing with any frost and freeze, I think it's going to be a good opportunity to get out and plant some if you want to for this weekend, especially with this beautiful weather. Is even as we look into the middle of this month, this pattern just looks to remain mild, average to above average in terms of our temperatures. It does not look like we're dealing with a cool pattern going into the middle of the month. All right, so let's jump back into it. As again, we're still dealing with some strong thunderstorms in the area. So let's jump back into it, see where we stand with these storms. We'll continue to track them a little bit longer before we wrap up this edition of Nate at 8. So there's a strong thunderstorm right now, continuing to lift north across Jefferson County. It does include there the northeastern portion of Harrison. This is going to be impacting portions of Carroll County as well. So closer to Carrollton and then east, mainly the eastern part of Carroll County. And then this is lifting as well through Brook and eventually Hancock. So it's going to be impacting northern Jefferson. It's going to be impacting Brook, Hancock, and eventually Columbiana County. And this is really it. We're closely watching this storm for any severe potential that we have remaining likely for this evening. And, also going to be watching these, back towards Washington, PA. We'll keep an eye on those as well. But this is really it. What we see remain at this point. This is what we're going to be watching continuing here over the next hour or two. And if there's going to be a severe thunderstorm, it's going to come from one of these cells, either again back towards Washington, PA, or as we look further into our area there to Jefferson County, Brook, Hancock, Harrison, Carroll, Columbiana. Those locations is where we're watching. And again, we've been dealing with some gusty winds. We've been dealing with some small hail with this. We've been dealing generally with hail sizes closer to about pea-sized, or I know somebody reported hail size more on the order of about a dime. So dealing with some of the dime-sized hail or pea-sized hail, in general, smaller-sized hail, not to the extent that we've been dealing with anything upwards of quarter size that would prompt a severe thunderstorm warning. But nonetheless, still some small hail remains possible with this as it's continuing to lift north across the area. In addition to that, some gusty winds. Been generally dealing with wind gusts upwards of about 40 miles per hour. And so we've been generally dealing with, and we'll see what radar is estimating at this point. Again, just doing a sampling across the area. Again, just clicking and getting upwards about 30 mile per hour wind gusts right now is what radar is estimating. And again, there's been, generally dealing with these wind gusts up to about 40 miles per hour for a lot of the time we're dealing with this storm lifting across the area. And again, that potential there as well in terms of the hail size up to about pea-sized hail, and it does remain possible possible with this as it continues to lift north across the area. Still a strong thunderstorm, right? Some gusty winds, some small hail, still a strong thunderstorm. And on top of that, of course, some heavy downpours with this as well. And, we're still, thankfully have not had any training of these storms over the same location. If that were to occur, then we're dealing with some flooding concerns as well. This certainly is producing some heavy downpours with these storms as they pass as well. Something as well to note with these. LaBelle and Steubenville dealing with some hail. Brian reports. And yeah, dealing with that as well. I'm going to head off here. All right, Drew, have a good night. Thanks for updating. I'll see you on the 11 o'clock tonight. Have a great night. Thanks so much. You as well. Is it going to move through the area fast? Not too fast. No, it's moving, maybe moving about 30 miles per hour. So it's not, these are not moving really fast through the area. These are certainly, I would say, fast, but not real slow either. I guess kind of in between, if you will, Kaylee, as they're moving north across the area. Andy saying, thank God I'm over this rain. That I know it's nice to see that that dry pattern, that's for sure. Dylan saying getting some small hail at the station, which we talked about how I could hear it hitting the roof. So Dylan Cleland confirming that getting some small hail at the station with this. So small hail, gusty winds. That's it. That's what we've been dealing with, and that potential continues as this lifts to the north, again impacting northern Jefferson. It's going to be moving through Brooke, Hancock County, the more central eastern part of Carroll County, a good portion of Columbiana County, especially central western part of Columbiana County. And those are the areas that, this is moving into. And again, nothing severe we're tracking right now, but still these wind gusts, they've been up to generally about 40 miles per hour. We've been dealing with some small hail, some heavy downpours, got obviously some lightning within this as well. And that's what we've been seeing with these. Mandy, I'm mentioning that nice lightning strikes right now near East Springfield. Mandy talking about our lightning there with these storms as well. In addition to that heavy rain, gusty winds, and small hail. That's what we've been dealing with. And I can hear the rain continuing. It's heavy here at the station, that's for sure. I heard some small hail within that as well as some gusty winds. You can hear those winds picking up as well. And that's a lot of what to watch for as this continues to lift north across the area. And that's what we see a lot with these storms as well. And dealing with a little better, you can see that hail core much more pronounced there. We're looking closer to Washington, PA. So, much more well-organized hail core there, likely dealing with maybe a little larger hail there near Washington. If this gains a little more strength, it's probably going to get warned if that hail size grows a little bit larger. But yeah, small hail, gusty winds, heavy downpours. It's a lot of what we're seeing with this. These are strong as this continues to lift north through Jefferson, Brooke, and now into Carroll County as well. And it's sliver there. I guess you could say a sliver of Hancock County. But yeah, moving its way towards Hancock County as well. And eventually it's going to be moving into Columbiana County, more the eastern part of Carroll County. And our severe thunderstorm watch remains in effect. We got 40 more minutes now at this point, remains in effect till 9 o'clock, and their severe risk will start to wane. Really just watching this storm pass. Once this passes, then the severe risk is going to get cut off. Once this moves out of the area, that's when the severe risk is going to fall off. So really just watching this storm at this point to make sure it doesn't gain any more strength as this continues to progress in the north. And that's what we're going to be watching at this point, is just watching the strong thunderstorm lift north through the area. They've been going northwest. They've been tracking more northwest. It's around an upper level low. So yeah, definitely odd storm movement. That's certainly something worth mentioning as well. Yes. Definitely it's yeah, these have, if we broaden our view, in fact, let me go. So you can see if we broaden the view here, you can get kind of the look. So you can see how a lot of this precipitation, you can see the direction of this, right? And this just happens to be right around an upper level low. You can see that this precipitation essentially is wrapping around this upper level low, and that's why we're getting that odd direction as we're dealing with this with around this upper level low. That's why our precipitation, these storms are moving that direction more from the south moving north and even to the northwest. It is an odd storm direction for us to be dealing with. Yeah, we don't typically deal with that. And the culprit, again, is this upper level low, which as this upper level low then starts to move a little bit further towards the, let's see if we can draw. Here we go. I thought we could drag this. No, there we go. I just had to pick it up. So as this continues to then pivot further towards the east, this is fun. Once this upper level low finally moves out of the area, you're going to notice that as it starts to move out of the area, the precipitation is going to pivot back around with this. So you'll notice that with that precipitation moving back in, we're going to be on the tail end of it. So that precipitation that'll wrap around this low on the very tail end of it, then as it pivots back into the area, this is that precipitation that we're going to see return for the latter part of tomorrow. And then finally that upper level low will exit, and then we'll dry up going into Wednesday. So you notice that this precipitation will lift north out of the area. We'll get into a drier slot with this low, and then the precipitation will pivot then back east into the area on the tail end of this, and that's when our precipitation will be arriving out of the west, moving east back into the area tomorrow. So multiple directions with our precipitation, that's for sure, but we'll get that direction of precipitation that's moving east with that rain moving back into the area tomorrow. As this low begins to pivot out of the area, then that precipitation will then move back into the region, and we'll be noticing that direction again change. So this upper level low is the culprit to why we're dealing with these unique, I think, it's a unique direction of our precipitation. Certainly with these storms, it's a unique direction to deal with these moving to the northwest, and the culprit's this upper level low. And again, as it starts to move out of the area, then at the very back edge of this precipitation with the system, will pivot back into the area for the latter part of tomorrow. And then finally that moves out, and we can start to spot a little more sunshine returning, and we can start to spot some dry conditions on Wednesday, thankfully returning to the forecast. So certainly going to be looking forward to that coming our way here, as this is looking awfully nice by the time we get into Friday, the weekend. Lots of that sunshine returning, temperatures picking back up into the 70s even by this weekend after generally some cooler days. I think we can sneak back into 70s Wednesday, but that's generally a cooler stretch of weather going into Friday. Then temperatures pick up through the weekend, and early next week we're back in the 80s, and we get back into a quiet stretch of weather likely Friday through the weekend, as we get under a ridge of high pressure, maintaining some pretty quiet conditions, I think, overall from through the weekend and even into early next week. So if you've been hoping for a drier pattern, this is certainly it coming our way, thankfully, for the weekend. And again, I think the overall pattern remains warm. I think a lot of unseasonably warm temperatures ahead going into the middle of the month. And I think at this point, the risk of dealing with certainly any freeze, but even a frost is looking low, as likely maintaining a mild pattern going into the middle of the month. So I think at this point, usually want to hold off to around the middle of May to plant the sensitive vegetation. But I really think at this point, the odds of us dealing with a frost or freeze are looking low. So I think that, if you wanted to, I think this weekend will present a good opportunity to plant, as again, I think this pattern just remains warm into the middle of the month. And I think the odds are low that we're going to be dealing with especially a freeze, but even a frost. See those temperatures dipping in the mid 30s, as I think the risk of that is overall low as we do look ahead into the middle of the month. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. And again, the weather is looking awfully nice for this coming weekend. We'll continue to watch those strong thunderstorms moving across the area. And of course, if we were to become warned, I'll certainly let you know. You can follow me on Nathan Shutt News 9 and Shutt WTOV. You can follow me on Facebook or X, and I'll continue to update you guys going throughout the evening. As we're going to keep a close eye on this thunderstorms continuing over the next hour or so, and that severe risk will then likely start to taper off, as we'll see a lot of precipitation likely tapering off into the latter part of tonight as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, you can catch me coming up News 9 at 10 on Fox 9, News 9 tonight at 11. And as always, of course, tomorrow's edition of Nate at 8 as well. You can join me for the latest, as we'll probably track some rain for tomorrow evening. So make sure to stay tuned for that as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful night.